Hello, and welcome back to Uncle Sal's Garage. On the last episode, we kind of started, then installed, then started for real the 2270 motor in preparation for running it in the Dustball Adirondack Rally. On today's episode, I'm going to recap the rally, take you through what's happened since, and hopefully close the book on the 2270 build series. Just a note, this video is a bit different than the last few in that I didn't document everything along the way, given that we were running at a breakneck pace just to get to the rally, but I'll do my best to fill you in on what we've done since. Let's get started.
Part 1, Rally Recap. For the second year in a row, this car ran in the Dustball Adirondack Rally. Only this year, we brought a few more ponies with us. Around 50 to be clear. As always, we had a great time, and thanks again to Bill and Sal for hosting. As some of you may have noticed in past build videos, we are running a European Motorworks style exhaust on this build. This is due to the 1.8 heat exchangers not mating up properly with the 2.0 heads, which has more to do with the 1.8 heat exchangers being old and bent and not so much to do with the geometry of the head's exhaust ports. The issue I was having was that I couldn't get all ports to seal without a significant exhaust leak in one or more of them. Significant enough to make me not want to drive the new motor with it like that. And the more I fiddled with the 1.8 heat exchangers and filed them down, the worse it got. So at a certain point, I just said, screw it, run the other exhaust. This was a mistake. The net result of running this style exhaust was that I wasn't familiar with how to set the cables up so that they didn't get smoked. And as you guessed it, I ruined them both. Despite all this and the repairs I needed to do when I got home, in the end, it was an experience well worth it and an awesome memory with the new motor. Part 2, Post-Rally Work. When I returned home from the rally, I set about fixing these and other issues that had popped up. My to-do list looked like this.
Just to show you how bad of an idea it was not to properly support these cables with the exhaust right there. I mean, this is my Speedo cable, so it's completely smoked. This is my clutch cable, which is why the metal was expanding. My clutch wasn't engaging while I was on the rally. And this guy right here was just sort of like a little bit near to an exhaust one of the exhaust manifolds, but not exactly fully touching it. And so I don't know where people run these wires when they run a European header style exhaust, but I've learned my lesson that I don't think that exhaust is right for me. And as a result, I've got to replace both of these cables now. So I went and pulled the exhaust off the car, and you know, I'll disconnect these cables, and I got stuff to do on the interior and go from there.
To begin with, I purchased and installed new cables.
And so they're installed. I mean, they're not fully buttoned up on the inside of the car, but I got them through the tunnels, and they're just sort of the Speedo cables off to the side, the clutch cables in there. I'm about to connect them both now, get the cabin done, and then focus on the underside. So, be right back.
Once I reattached the cables, and with the race exhaust off the car, I performed a 1,000-mile valve adjustment and replaced the pushrod tubes and seals. Then, finally, I got the correct exhaust setup for this build. A set of 2.0 SSI heat exchangers and a Bursch muffler to go with it. And finally, I replaced the front wheel bearings that started to feel a bit notchy on the rally.
Driver's side, you hear that? It's super notchy, so I think the bearing is going, because I tried to tighten it several times and it just didn't take.
What I learned is the outer bearing on the driver's side was completely toasted. The grease looked totally different. It was all black. It smelled different. And when you sort of, I don't have my gloves on right now, so I'm not gonna do it. But when you kind of grab it and rotate it, you could feel it's like a little notchy. So that was the culprit. It's the outer bearing. I probably could have gotten away with not taking everything off, but I figured I'd do it right. I'd learn the process, give it a nice good cleaning, repack everything with some fresh grease. So per Ian Carr's recommendation, I using the old races, cut a notch in them so that I could use these old races to press in the new races. So I'm just going to go ahead and assemble these now with grease and pack them up before going back over to the car and getting them on.
Part 3, Chasing Down Oil Leaks.
There's oil on the back of the muffler hanger. There's oil all along the transaxle, and that's even, you could see there a pool forming. Kind of all the way back up to the motor. And there's oil on the cables. All right, there's, surprisingly, there's not the kind of oil pooling from the pushrod tube bottoms that, I was seeing last time. And that could just mean that it's coming out so fast that it's just not pooling and it's flying everywhere else. So pushrod tube seals is definitely a candidate culprit, but something else is a little more concerning as we work up the motor here. Let me just position this light. So as we work up the motor, look at that. I don't know if you can see it, but the oil filter definitely has a leak coming down it. You can just kind of see because it's brighter along that strip. I'm not sure it's showing up on camera, but it's definitely visible to the naked eye. So there's that. And then as we move up, which is what's concerning me, you've got definite oil residue on the oil cooler. So this first two, you can even see it right there. Those first two, waffles or whatever they're called, have oil on them. And then as you move farther up, it's going to be really hard to film, but do you see that drip right there where my finger is? That is a drip forming on the actual oil cooler edge. So what's going on? And some of that right there on the neck that connects the oil filter to the case, some of that is just Permatex, from assembly. So even though it looks brown and shiny, some of that's just dried Permatex, but some of it is oil. There's definitely oil dripping down there, dripping onto the, this is the thermostat, the spring-loaded thermostat thingy here, the huge, flathead screwdriver thing. So there's definitely an oil leak happening up in this area because there's too much evidence of oil way up in here to make it these pushrod tubes. I mean, that's not possible, I don't think, to get all the oil all the way up. So there's a problem here. There may be two problems. I mean, that's definitely a little oil pool coming out of the pushrod tube. So, those pushrod tube seals may be also not so great. But I actually think once I get the exhaust heat exchangers and the exhaust off the car and cleaned, I gotta have to look up here. I gotta take the oil filter off and start investigating leaks up here because there's definitely something happening in the oil cooler area. So super bad news. So it turns out that this oil pressure thermostat screw was about, maybe 1 to 2 hours on a clock, sort of clicks off, loose. And then, like I said, when I took this off, I felt like the filter was a little too loose. So I put that back on super tight, and then I actually was able to get, I don't know, an eighth of a turn or, a small amount of turns from the bolts or the nuts that are holding the oil cooler on. And so I'm just feeling like maybe just by tightening up some of the oil cooler, oil filter, and then oil pressure / thermostat. I mean, all of these were loose, so all of these got slightly tighter just now. I honestly think that's going to be the trick, because again, there was no evidence of oil dripping on my actual heat exchanger bodies. It was only down by the flange, down at the end. And the hypothesis is that the oil was just flowing right out of here and flying as I was driving fast, and hitting this down here. Also, the muffler hanger was also full of oil. So for that all, to be full of oil down here and not up here, I really don't think it's the pushrod tubes. And I just don't want to touch it. I just don't want to touch the motor, take the rockers off, tighten them, retighten them, untighten them. It's a 50-year-old motor. I just don't want to do that. So I'm going to let it tell me to do it. So, I may have taken the heat exchanger on and off one extra time. While I'm at it, I didn't actually do that too. So, but I think that's the right move for now, because there's no evidence that those were leaking, and at least not leaking badly. And I just don't want to touch them. So, tighten this, tighten that, tighten that. Fingers crossed this does it.
And it didn't exactly do it. What you see here, this oil splatter pattern with a quarter there for size reference, is the result of it sitting after a day of good hard driving. My uncle and I went out. We did a little mini rally out in West Jersey and brought the car back, turned it off, sat there for a few hours, and before I rolled it farther into my garage, that was what I saw. So I don't know if that's normal for a Type 4 motor or within a range that it's okay to just kind of live with it like that. I really don't know, but it's not pouring oil, but it is dripping oil after a hard day of running. Up next on Uncle Sal's Garage, tuning the motor and installing an MSD.